Hey there, how y'all doing today? This is Data from my backyard here in the western suburbs of Chicago, back on the homestead. I know this is a little bit delayed review of round 3 and round 4, which I'm going to kind of talk about together, of my trips on the Appalachian Trail that happened a couple of weeks ago. The briefest explanation of that is just that when I got back to the homestead, we had some tree work to get done. We also put another big oak tree in the ground. But also, as you may hear in the background, there's some chainsaw noises. So we had a big storm blow through, and our property was fine because we've been trying to keep up with tree maintenance while we owned it. But you know, some trees didn't fare so well in the neighborhood. So there's a lot of work that's been going on now for the past couple of weeks. But everything's fine. No one was hurt. There was no serious damage around. Took our power out on and off for a couple of days. Knocked a couple of trees down elsewhere in the neighborhood. But as you can see, as part of my tree work before that, behind me are a couple of fresh cut stacks of firewood that I spent most of the last couple of weeks after I had a tree cut down, splitting it, stacking it, building some stand for it, stuff like that. So, all is well in the western suburbs of Chicago. And I thought I'd do a quick review of round 3 and 4 together of my hiking on the Appalachian Trail for 2025. Round 3 I hiked from Burningtown Gap, where I had got blown off trail last year by Hurricane Helene. I started there and I hiked eventually up to Newfound Gap and then came off trail in the heart of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. That's a total of about 83 miles. So that was a pretty good hike. Put me at 446 miles total on the Appalachian Trail, so I'm almost a quarter of the way done. Not where I wanted to be, but you know, I'm making progress. I went back a couple weeks later because Mrs. Data was so enamored of how fondly I talked about gorgeous stays and the hiking in that part of the Smokies that she wanted to go back and see some of it for herself. So I took her back and we hiked the 4 miles from Newfound Gap up to Charlie's Bunion and back. So actually all told, I'm at 450 miles plus or minus a little bit of the Appalachian Trail now. The hiking was really pretty good. Weather didn't cooperate a lot. It was overcast. I got rained on a little bit. But I did, not including the round 4 one day with Mrs. Data, I did 8 days of hiking on the AT. I hiked from Burningtown Gap to the NOC in a day, and then I hiked over the course of 3 days from Fontana Dam back southbound to the NOC. And then the third set of days I hiked from Fontana Dam up through the park to Newfound Gap, and then came off trail. So over the 8 days I totaled 83 miles, so that's a little bit more than 10 miles a day, and I'm pretty happy with that. I think my hiking distance average on the Appalachian Trail right now is running 12 miles a day or so. It was a little bit less this time because logistically it's more complicated to hike through the Appalachian Trail through the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, because you have to make reservations at shelters or campsites, and that constrains where you can stay and how far you can hike. So I had some 13-mile days, a 13-mile day in the park, but there's also limitations on how much of that flexibility you have in the park. But I'm okay. The Smokies were, I'm okay with that result. The Smokies were a legitimate challenge, more elevation change than I've ever done in my life if you added all the rest of my hiking up together. So it was a workout. It was a real legitimate challenge, and I enjoyed it a great deal once I was done. Definitely type 2 sort of fun. Learned a couple of lessons. I hiked in the rain on day 2, and then that evening I didn't let my feet dry out well. My shoes and socks didn't get dried out. I hiked in wet gear on day 3, and it's actually day 4. And so when I got back to Gorgeous Stays for the second time, I had trench foot develop that evening. I didn't even know what trench foot was when that happened, but my feet swole up a little bit, got really bright red, very sensitive to the touch, very itchy. and I couldn't hardly stand on them to walk. It hurt so bad. And so I looked it up online, and sure enough, I'm pretty sure I was developing the early onset of the case of trench foot. So I got some lotion, like hand lotion that was medicated, vitamin E, aloe, stuff like that, from Wendy at Gorgeous Stays. And I put that on my feet a couple of times that night and the following morning, and that seemed to solve the problem, so that was good. But I learned a valuable lesson about being careful about your foot care in terms of when they get wet, not letting them stay wet. So I take my socks off at night now when my feet have been wet all day and let the foot itself dry out completely. This was my test case for using a sleep system that involved just a quilt, and just really like a warm weather quilt, like a 50-degree quilt, and a sleeping pad, and that worked really well. My pack was a lot lighter. I was very comfortable. I enjoyed sleeping with the quilt, like a sleeping bag, but not a whole sleeping bag kind of a setup. It was very comfortable, so I enjoyed that a great deal. I cold soaked the whole time, and that worked out pretty well. I had plenty of calories, and all in all, I think it was a pretty successful trip, so I'm pretty happy with that. I was especially happy that I had enough fun that when I came back and talked about it with Mrs. Data, that she wanted to go back with me for her first trip hiking on the Appalachian Trail. So I really enjoyed that. She had a good time the day that we hiked. I don't think she's going to be staying overnight backpacking with me just yet and backcountry camping, but we might do some platinum blazing in the future on some sections. I don't know. She seemed to really get into it, so that was nice. It was fun. I like doing stuff with my lady. She's my partner in life, and we've been together for canoodling for like 30 years now, so we get along pretty well. So I'd like to be able to take her on some of these hikes and let her see some of what I see. I'm looking forward to going back for the next one. I'm not exactly sure where that next Appalachian Trail hike will be. That'll be later on in the year, probably a month or a month and a half from now. My next hike really is going to be on the Ice Age Trail. And it's probably going to be 80 to 100 miles. And I think Mrs. Data is going to do the first day of that with me also. So you watch. I'll make a hiker out of her yet. Oh, maybe. So I'll be hiking about 100 miles or so of the Ice Age Trail up in Wisconsin from somewhere near Janesville up to about 100 miles north of that up through the Kettle Moraine, probably in 2 or 3 weeks from now. Other than that, everything on the homestead is in good shape, and my hiking is moving along. So I hope you all are having an enjoyable summer, and maybe some of you all are getting out doing some hiking also, some camping and some time with family in the wilderness. All of that I'm a big supporter of. I think that's a lot of fun. It's been good for me this year, the past 12 months. I had a viewer on the channel ask me some time ago about what kind of books I read and listened to while on trail or in preparation for hiking the trail. I would say that I read Grandma Gatewood's Walk, which I know a lot of people have read, but I think that's a good place for people to start. Just because on my worst day on trail, I can quiet the whininess in my own mind by thinking about how much more difficult Gatewood or anybody else who hiked it prior to the invention of all this new lightweight fancy gear had it. So I would encourage people to start with Grandma Gatewood's Walk. But then also recently, I started reading On Trails, which is a book written, the New York Times bestseller from just a few years ago. And it's about why humans build trails, why animals build trails historically throughout the history of the world. And it's an interesting discussion of why we make trails, why animals make trails, what purpose they serve, how we use the trails of other animals, all kinds of interesting stuff. A lot of scholarly research behind it and some great anecdotes. So I highly recommend On Trails as a good read or a listen to while you're hiking. But then also Scott of Gorgeous Stays turned me on to a book called The Comfort Crisis. And it's a similar book, a similar topic, at least in my mind. Comfort Crisis is about, it's hard to sum up, but it's a story of the writer's exploration of hiking and doing hard things, and how in modernity we've really quit doing hard things. That is, we've made ourselves very comfortable. I know that certainly was the case in my life. And that culture of comfort where we spend a lot of time sitting in our chairs, at our desks, in our cars, and we don't do things that are difficult and that challenge us, especially physically, that there's a cost we're paying for that. And it's a cost that's physical and psychological. There's a lot of research that's been done on how to address that, or the benefits of various kinds of addressing it. The author doesn't, at least so far at this point, he doesn't really talk about long distance backpacking as one of the ways to do it, but he talks about rucking, and he talks about hunting, and a bunch of other things in the backcountry. And I have found it tapped into something that I said, for anybody who remembers or who watched my video from a year or so ago, when I talked about the 3 reasons why I'm hiking the Appalachian Trail, in that I needed to do something that was actually hard, to test myself, sort of see what I was still capable of as a retired 64-year-old guy. And I know a lot of people talk about, who hike, a lot of older folks talk about that they hike it because they retired and they want the challenge, and they need the workout, or they need the goal of doing something really hard. It turns out that there's some evidence-based research that's actually a very shared issue for many of us in Western society generally, and in particular as we age, that it's a more widespread thing than I really thought, that a lot of people get to an age where they have a little time to reflect, and they find their life is maybe absent a challenge, and that they want the challenge to be physical. And as much as I had intellectualized that I wanted that, it turns out that physiologically and physically, answering that call of a challenge that I felt has been very good for me physically. As I've dropped 20 pounds since I started the long distance hiking thing. I'm in much better condition. My balance is better, a whole bunch of things like that. Turns out in the course of the book, The Comfort Crisis, that there's a lot of academic research over the years, in addition to good anecdotal stuff from a broad range of people who do challenging outdoor activities, that this is very good for us physically and psychologically. That is, putting weight on our back and doing something hard over a prolonged amount of time, and literally embracing the suck, as we say on trail. Doing the hard thing because it's hard and difficult, it doesn't just build character. It's actually really good for us physiologically, and it's better for us in terms of getting in shape than a lot of the stuff that I had tried for years before, like running 5Ks and going to the gym and doing a lot of long distance walking just around my neighborhood for miles at a time, or playing pickleball or tennis or golf. All of those things can be good activities, but there are some specific benefits to long distance walking with weight on your back that make things like mountaineering, rappelling, rock climbing, long distance hiking, backcountry hunting, all of these kinds of things are better address the needs we have as human beings in terms of how to get in better physical condition. And I think actually there's some psychological benefits that may be much more deeply rooted. So this book, The Comfort Crisis, is a really good listen or a really good read. And so I would say, The Comfort Crisis, On Trails, and Grandma Gatewood's Walk are the 3 things that I would recommend people consider reading or listening to if you want to get started kind of in the backcountry, having some fun and trying to get in some better shape.